Okay, so next, I'm really excited about welcoming onto stage a very impressive individual. So he was formerly the Chief Product Officer at Showmax, where he ran product, UX, QA, and growth teams to some amazing results. He led them over a 3-year period to actually launch video on demand into over 70 countries. Very, very impressive. And now is the Director of Products at Booking, where he is helping that company on their vision of empowering all people to have amazing travel experiences, something that I know I'm really excited about seeing the type of impact that he can have there. So I'd love it if we all could welcome onto the stage Bear Nerds.
Hi everyone. So, just really quickly, Justin did a really nice job of introducing me, but I wanted to just quickly give a sense for sort of where I've been before. The big reason is, I think what I try to do in this talk is answer a very similar question to what Justin was trying to answer, which is, why are products not better? And sort of what I've done is, over the 14 or so years I've been doing product across a variety of companies, what I've tried to do with this talk is really give a sense for how I now think about structuring a modern product management team, and then what are some of the mistakes I still see getting made, both old mistakes that I saw right when I started as a product person, but then mistakes that are kind of more modern and newer that you see with more and more data being available. So, sort of what I'm saying is, I've been trying to answer the same question, which is, why are the products that we build not better? What are the things that really prevent us from building great product teams? And I still see 2 big mistakes. The first one is one I've seen for a long time. The second one is a bit newer. So, feature creep is still a problem. This graphic has probably been around for years, and it's still relevant. I mean, the fact that the remote has 1 billion buttons is still actually a problem, but it's still a problem with most of the prominent products that we use anyways. It becomes more and more of an issue with bigger products that we see. It becomes an issue even with smaller products when you're trying to figure out what is the next critical thing that I can build to just get a user addicted to my product and wanting to use it. And it comes from a place of, I don't know what to build next. I'm not sure how I'm going to solve a problem for my customer. So instead I'm just going to bolt something on and hope that it works. It comes from a place of not actually understanding who your customer is fundamentally, or oftentimes not looking at your data to figure out, hey, this is working, this isn't working, this is where we should double down. But a newer problem that I'm seeing more and more is over-optimization. And so this is sort of the flip side. You've got something that's working, you see some good signals in your data, and then rather than continuing to talk to your customer and understand from them, hey, why is this working, what problem am I trying to solve, you just go into this mode. You start thinking about, okay, I'm going to tweak the dials, I'm going to start changing all of the button colors, I'm going to move this thing from here to here, and all of that works, but eventually you get to a point of marginal return, and you can't actually figure out how to keep innovating within your product organization. And what often happens in this scenario is you lose that innovative process that you need in order to keep building a great product, and you also lose focus on who your customer is, and you just sort of start to think of them as one more data point, one more bit of information that you're bringing in, versus thinking of them as an actual user. So, it's interesting because this is an old problem, this is a newer problem, but I think they have a lot of similarities from where they're coming from. I think the biggest one is teams still aren't great at understanding the problem that their product is solving. I think a lot of what Justin said about context is very true here, but I think it's just even more simple than that. A lot of teams still don't spend the time to go out and actually physically talk to their customers. They don't spend the time to actually sit down and understand, tell me what you are doing with my product every single day, tell me how you are using it, and then use that to come back and generate really good insights for how they're going to build a better offering. But then secondarily, a lot of more modern product managers are really bad at forming hypotheses. People are not really good at saying, okay, I've talked to my user, based on what problem they're trying to solve, I can now come up with a clear reasoning why I'm going to build the features I'm going to build, why I'm going to run the test I'm going to run. Instead, the idea is more like, let me just innovate and do as many things as quickly as possible without really stepping back and thinking about what am I actually doing, what problem am I solving. And for most product orgs and for most companies, you probably don't have enough data to have the luxury of going that fast. It actually makes sense to spend more time thinking and more time coming up with the right approach versus using your engineering team and wasting those resources and pushing them to go as fast as possible. And then the next few are sort of related, right? Product owners don't validate their hypotheses with data. They just sort of start running things. Also, a lot of people think that the only way to validate a hypothesis is by looking at quantitative data and forgetting that you can actually then take your screenshots, take your proposed ideas back to a user and seeing if they work before you actually ever build anything. So one of the experiences I've been with is I worked at InView, which was the company where Lean Startup kind of came from. It was co-founded by Eric Ries. And the very interesting thing that I think has been muddled about the Lean Startup process is an assumption that build an MVP, get it out quickly, and get user validation data. But really what was meant there was have a clear hypothesis, make sure that your users can validate that hypothesis in some way before you ever build anything. And I feel like that step really gets missed when companies attempt to do Lean Startup nowadays. And it's something that as I build product teams, I really try to instill in the teams. It's all about how can we think critically about what the user is doing, what the data can tell us, and how we can use it to validate what we're trying to learn. The last two are pretty important. The second to last one is one that I just see a lot. Lots of teams go around the internet, come to conferences like this, and they think of what are other teams doing to optimize and build the best product, and what hacks can I quickly take from them? What are the growth hacks that are out there? Most of the time, those don't work for you. Your customer is different from everyone else's customer. And the fact is, if you're just relying on what another team has done, you're not spending the time to understand who your user is. And then lastly, and this is really in the optimization realm, people focus only on the data. They don't actually focus on who the user is and what that data tells them about the customer. So I sort of say all of this to kind of come to this point. When you're building a product and an offering, everyone is in search of this red growth line. That's why I labeled it the growth line that everyone draws. Because it's the growth line that everyone is in search of, that everyone thinks is the reality of how products get built. But if you look at what really happens, actual growth looks a lot more like the blue line. You build a feature, it gives you a small spike, you optimize that feature, while hopefully at the same time trying to figure out what to build next. And hopefully by the time you've had some marginal return on that previous feature, you've found a new thing to build. Growth happens in fits and starts. It doesn't happen as one continuous perfect line. And you'll get the presentation afterwards, but there's a nice link from Andy Johns who did a really nice job of outlining this. And I think the point of this is, if you're thinking about product as this continual up and to the right thing, you're thinking about it wrong. You need to think about it as, what is the next incremental build that I'm going to have that's going to get me more users and get me more people engaging with my product? So what are the keys then to modern product management? First of all, people need to understand the customer. I feel like I'm going to repeat myself on this the whole presentation, but I spent 4 years going around different companies at Naspers, which is a fairly large international company all over the globe. I spent some time at Booking now, I spent time in Silicon Valley. And increasingly, if you ask people, did you talk to your customers? The answer is more and more no. And that's disheartening in a way, because it means that people aren't actually spending the time to understand who their users are. Instead, they're just treating their users as a data point. But secondarily, it's really important to be able to formulate key hypotheses about a customer. So if you're not actually talking to them, how can you possibly say what you think they're trying to achieve and how you're going to make their experience better? And it's really important that you're able to do that even for things as small as running an A/B test. If you can't clearly articulate why an A/B test is a good idea, maybe you shouldn't run it. Maybe you should save those resources and do something else with them. Data is incredibly important. So one thing that I worry this talk can be criticized about is, are you saying don't use data? That's not the point at all. The point of this talk is data matters a ton. Data is how you validate that you are taking the right approach. Data is also how you get insights about your users. Data is how you validate that your A/B tests or your ideas or your hypotheses are working. But data is not enough. You have to combine data plus insights about your user to really figure out how to build the best product for them. Not surprisingly, most important is talk to your customers. Figure out what problem you're solving. If you can't walk away from a product meeting and clearly say, this is what we're trying to do for our users, both at a team level and also at a company level, then it's a key question to start asking is why are we not able to answer this, and what could we do to be able to answer this question? So the interesting thing that I've started to see over time is if you start to think about conversion and innovation as the two areas that we're talking about here. So back to this for a second. This represents a set of innovation when you get the big steps, and then optimization of that innovation as you kind of make that line go up and to the right. Those represent different parts of a life cycle of a company, and also different types of teams that work in your product or in your growth organization. So what I've tried to do with the next part is how do you start to apply those principles to product teams as you build out an organization. So I like to show this. This is the efficient frontier for portfolio investment. It provides actually a model for how I think product teams should think about building out the things that they're going to work on as a product organization. So for example, if all your team is doing is optimizing, then you're making a lot of very small bets with probably high upside, with low upside that have a high probability of return that are going to get marginal return over time. If you're making lots of big innovative bets, then you have a number of really large investments that have a low probability of success, and you might get lucky, but you're not balancing your portfolio of bets enough. A good product organization and a good product team figures out the right way to balance the number of bets it's making. Some that are long, some that are short, some that are optimization, some that are innovation. And that's not to say that product teams don't need OKRs, KPIs, or goals. That's not actually the point of my talk at all. Actually, the OKRs, KPIs, and goals help you define what that portfolio should look like for each individual team. So this is a very simplified version of how my team at Showmax looked. We had a growth team, a core product team. So the growth team focused on improving funnel conversion. Core product was really focused on how do we add new platforms, how do we innovate on our product. We were very focused on Sub-Saharan Africa, so think of it as a streaming video platform for Sub-Saharan Africa. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we help people in low bandwidth environments get streaming video, a very high bandwidth product working for them. So a lot of core product spent there. We had an infrastructure and content management team, which was all about how do we make sure our content gets effectively uploaded to and in front of our customers? How do we make sure that we have the right platform to do that? And last, we had a personalization team, which was about how do we quickly get a customer from watching content to seeing additional content, or from logging in to seeing some content. Each one of these teams had a fairly clear KPI: funnel conversion, retention rate, rapid upload, and sort of satisfaction of internal users. And the last one was something we called time to view. And then with each of those KPIs, you could actually create sort of the efficient frontier model or the portfolio approach for each one of these different teams. So for a growth team, and again, this is something that Andy Johns as well talked about, and there's another link here. So again, I reference him a lot here because I think he did a really good job with this. But a growth team, for example, is very optimization focused. It's all about optimize core flows, get people in quickly, get them to convert quickly, with a small amount of innovation there for larger bets that might help you get more people in more quickly. But most of the effort is all on how do I quickly test, how do I quickly get you through the funnel. Core product, very focused on innovation. Lots of our time was spent on how do we add new platforms, how do we make it easier for users to download content, how do we improve bandwidth, how do we make streaming easier, how do we deal with that in environments where bandwidth is actually quite bad. We spent a lot of time, as I said, in countries like South Africa and Kenya, and there's a lot of time spent thinking through how to solve fairly unique problems there in innovative ways. Infrastructure CMS, again, very innovation focused. You're all thinking about how do I make sure that my content can scale to other territories? How do I make sure that I'm able to scale in different languages? How do I make sure that the internal teams are getting what they need from my product? You're not doing a lot of time optimizing. And then personalization might even be more of a 50-50 split, but the idea is it's both implementing machine learning algorithms and then optimizing those algorithms to drive toward the right outcome and the right metric outcome. But the idea effectively is you can take the different KPIs, OKRs, whatever you want to use, whatever you want to call them for each of your different product teams. And you can use that as a way to define how much optimization or innovation should you expect within any individual team. And then what you can start to do is apply that framework to who should be on that team. So, for example, if you have a very optimization growth-focused team, you might not need someone who's super strong in visual design. You might not even need a lot of back-end resources, but what you probably definitely need is a product manager, someone who's an analyst or a data scientist, someone who can think through UX design, and some front-end resources to really just rapidly iterate and drive on conversion funnels. Whereas a more innovation-focused team definitely needs a product manager, definitely needs more built-out visual design and UX design resources to really think about who is the customer, what problem are you solving for them. Probably might also need to use a researcher to actually go and talk to that customer and understand qualitatively, are the solutions that we're building something that solves the problem that you have? And then of course needs front-end and back-end resources. And then last, internal innovation teams, you might not need any design resources at all. You might just need a product manager, a project manager, and some back-end resources. So the point of kind of all of this is if you start from a place of, if we're going to approach product as a portfolio, and then we're going to structure our teams in that way with key KPIs, you can then get to a place of how much innovation versus optimization do you need within your product teams, and then what resources do you need to go and hire for each of those product teams. So it kind of gives you a nice model to think about what should a product organization look like at different stages of your company, at different stages of growth with different sets of product teams. Now last, I'd like to talk about a little bit is just, you can also macro level this and you can apply these out to your larger organization or to your larger company. So company stage can be a major determinant for how much innovation or optimization you should be doing at any given time within the company. So if you start on the far right in the product market fit stage, this is a time of intense innovation. You shouldn't be thinking a lot about optimization. You shouldn't be thinking a lot about what is the tiny little test that I can run. What you should really be focusing on at this stage of your company is you're probably early stage. And you're probably trying to figure out, can we even build something with product market fit? And if that's the case, everything should be focused on innovation, talking to customers, hypothesis driven, and really, really focused on how can we get something in front of users that they're starting to use on a regular basis. As you start to get that product built, and you start to get data validation that's happening, you start to move into a growth stage. And a growth stage is where you're going to start to see more and more optimization really happening in your product organization. That's when you start to optimize on those core flows that are really working. And also at that stage, you potentially have less innovation, but it's also a good time to start thinking about how do you build the teams in that are going to innovate and create the next key thing for your product, that are going to create the next key opportunity for you to keep building your company and building your organization. And then eventually a company gets to a place where there's marginal growth from the original thing that you built, and you just need to optimize that as much as possible, but what you really need to do is double down on some sort of new innovation or some sort of new opportunity for the organization. You really need to start thinking about, how am I going to keep the company going? How am I going to keep this flywheel moving? What is the next thing that I'm going to build? But the thing that you see here is that none of these stages are just add a bunch of more features, add a bunch more optimization. You should be strategically planning as you build your company when to layer these different elements in, and it also layers back to the product team for how they're focusing as well. So for a product-led organization, which I think is more and more common, I think this is a really good approach that you can take to thinking about where you should be focusing on either optimization or innovation as you build your organization. For those of you who are really into horizon planning, it can also apply here. So horizon planning, for those of you who haven't seen it, is a fairly, it's a model that a lot of companies use. Horizon 1 is your mature businesses, Horizon 2 are your rapid growth businesses, and Horizon 3 are emerging businesses. And I think it actually fits quite well. Your mature companies, for a larger organization, the companies that are sort of your cash cows, they're optimization opportunities. You're not going to generate a whole lot of new innovation, a whole lot of new growth out of them. You want to optimize them as much as you can, and then move resources away to a phase of rapid growth. In the rapid growth phase, you're both doing optimization on the thing that's growing rapidly, and then also looking for new opportunities to innovate on that. And then at Horizon 3, which are your new companies in your group, you're looking for what are the new innovative opportunities or the new types of customers that you should be talking to and innovating with. So you're looking at, where can I find new users, where can I find new chances to grow my business. So what I've tried to do is start off from just like the very micro level. product people need to both understand the data side and the user side. There's a balance between optimization and innovation that needs to occur, and you have to shift back and forth as you build your product team and as you have your product owners coming into that organization. Then the next step of that is, as you start to scope out to you're building a whole product organization, how do you apply those principles across the organization? You have different teams that are focused on more on optimization, more on innovation, and it's about figuring out how to properly balance those teams. And then if you zoom out one more time, how do you apply that at a company-wide level, both for small companies and for larger companies? So the last point I want to make beyond that is, I think there's an ethical reason to be customer-focused, which is, as you look at a lot of companies that are very, very data-driven, it's very easy to forget who your user is. It's very easy to forget that person XYZ in this country is having this experience with my product. When you view them as just a data point and you view them as just something on your growth funnel, it's a lot easier to make product experiences that can have detrimental effects for the user, that can take away things like their privacy, and that just can be bad for them. But if you actually ground yourself in who is my customer, why are they buying my product, why are they using my product, I think it's a lot harder to build a product that actually hurts them in the end, and I think that there's some value in that in and of itself. So that is what I had, and I'm super happy to take questions. Okay, so I'll say it. The question was, how do you find the difference between optimization and innovation? And I'll go back to kind of what I said, but I think for me the biggest thing is there's a few different ways. One way is, if you're a very large company, so I'm at Booking now. Booking is a good example, right? The cost of optimization is lower because you have so many users hitting the website on a given day that it's a lot cheaper to run an individual test, right? So for example, it might be a bit less expensive to run a test on a given day because you can validate that experiment fairly quickly. But if you're at an earlier stage, or you have less users or less data points, innovation is a lot more important. Talking to customers is a lot more important. Because at that point in your life cycle, every test is going to be more expensive, and you might not have the opportunity to really even get enough data to run, 10 or 15 different tests that all have low cost. So I think, a lot of it depends on stage of your company and how many people are coming to your product, and then a lot of it also depends on what are you trying to build. If you're trying to build something that is brand new, something that is a total departure from what your company has done historically, then you're going to be more innovation focused by default because you need to understand what new problem you're solving. And if you're in an optimization phase, you're optimizing a growth funnel, you're optimizing a growth cycle, that's going to be more conversion focused. There's the...
Great talk. This is cool. So if you're moving your company from the product market fit, sort of innovation stage, more towards the optimization that's required, there's a lot of stakeholder management in terms of getting them out of the mindset of build. Can you give me what were your top tips to guide people to that mindset of needing to slow down building and optimize?
So I'm just going to try to clarify. You're going from the stage of, you're trying to convince internal people that just endless building is not the right approach, but instead we should be more smart about how we're approaching this. Yeah. So I think it can be challenging. I think the best way that I generally explain this to people in organizations is, A, there's almost always limited resources. So the assumption internally is, I will just have this long list of all these things and we're going to do, and then 90% of the time you do this many things anyways, right? So rather than pretending that we're going to do everything on the list, I would rather instead be just honest up front with people internally and just say, let me be clear, this is the list of things that are actually going to happen, and if this is the list of things that are actually going to happen, we need to be very choosy and picky about what those things are. So it actually behooves us on the product team to spend more time up front defining and being very clear about what outcomes we're trying to accomplish versus just coming up with a long laundry list of things that we can do. One of the sayings I like to say in companies is there's a whole lot of things that we can do. It's not whether we can do them, it's whether we should do them. And I've been quoted in companies as saying this, because the fact is you can do almost anything. Any team in theory is good enough to build anything, and that's not totally true, but theoretically. But what really you should be asking yourself is like, should I be doing these things? Is this the right list of work that's going to achieve the goals that we have? And then if you're getting pushback from above, I think what I've usually done is I've tried to create a framework where it's all about, okay, I'm very clear that you think feature X, Y, and Z is incredibly important. We agreed you should have some sort of quarterly process, right? It's like we agreed that these are the things we're going to work on this quarter, this year, this month. Which of these is more important or less important than the thing you want to build now? And create the pain of trade-off. To me, creating that pain of trade-off is something that a lot of product people don't do. Because if you don't do that and you just say yes to everything, you're not going to please anyone. And you're going to have a very difficult time as a PM. Anyone else?
Thank you. Hi, Barry. So I'm quite curious in terms of the kind of the way you structure your teams. So let's say you've got, and who makes the final call? So I think there's kind of a lot of talk in terms of product managers and that they lead via like influence rather than authority, all that kind of thing. So how does that work in terms of kind of the way that I think it was looking in terms of how you break the teams down into maybe kind of growth and support products. If it's the growth team, does that mean that the growth marketers or specialist has the final say? And then for the innovation, does maybe like the CTO like have the final say? How does that kind of work? Because
so just in case people can hear the question is, how do you in different organizations create the balance between innovation and optimization? Who defines it? Does it come from the individual PMs or from the CTO? I think it really depends. So in the case of Showmax, I was the chief product officer, so I was able to build it functionally within the organization. The way that I treated it was each one of my teams, me and the sort of lead product person for that team, would come to an agreement on both. So I had an overarching set of KPIs that the company was focused on, and then each team had a sub KPI or sub OKR, whatever we want to call it, that they were owning. And then based on that, it would lead to sort of a set of what do we think your efficient frontier looks like. But what I'm a big fan of is I do not want to micromanage my product teams. What I want to do is like, let's create the road that you're going to drive on. And as long as you're driving on that road and you are doing the right things in pursuit of your goal that makes sense, then I want to give as much leeway to my product team and their counterparts as I possibly can, trying to work with the CTO on that. Booking, I'm fairly new. It's been about 3 months. But booking, we are working fairly similarly, which is product teams and engineering teams with them have a lot of autonomy. So what I'm trying to do kind of at my level is just set out strategy for what each of the teams should focus on, what goals and metrics they should have. And then I'm trying to let each of the teams very much individually own that and drive it forward with regular check-ins with more senior leadership. And that's the ideal structure. I know that that's not always possible, but that is, when I've found that structure to be available, that's the best. It's a little bit harder if there's more micromanagement involved, and then you have to just try to figure out how do you give enough sort of heads up to whoever your management is on how you're going to structure these things and how you should give feedback. But that's a whole other chat. Yeah. I think we are out of time.
Yes. Can we all give Bear another round of applause? I'm very excited about our next speaker.